I am Martha Richardson, and I am not an expert. I just want to say that I am an expert experimentalist and probably will be forever. And I do want to preface this. There is no one way to grow seeds. Everybody that you talk to that grows seeds probably has a slightly different way of doing things, and they're all okay. Whatever works for you. I'm just going to give you kind of what I use and why I use it. All right, if you want something easy to start with, I would suggest that you try annuals. Annuals generally don't give you too much problem because their whole job in nature is to bloom, put on seed, put on lots of seed, drop it down around them, and die. That way, those annuals create new biomass in the ground so that the later perennials will have something in which to grow. But if you're out collecting seed, I would suggest you start with these plants because these are easiest and they have lots of seed that they throw off. Plains coreopsis, partridge pea, and either firewheel or Indian blanket, whatever you call it. These are fairly easy to try to grow. Now, later, some annuals and a lot of perennials have a little personality, I might say. You can't just put them in the soil and they grow. We're just going to go through a little bit of terminology here so that you will understand these words when people use them or when you read them. We're going to go through two physical dormancies. If you've ever picked bluebonnet seeds or baptisia or wine cup, you know that they have a rather hard seed coat. And these seeds require what's called, I call it scarification. It's probably scarification, but I like the word scar because it means you absolutely have to do something to the seed coat to get through it. Sometimes you can use hot water and soak them in hot and leave it there for a while. Sometimes you have to use sandpaper on a block or some way to kind of abrade the surface of those hard seeds and then soak them so that they will soak up water. The seeds are made that way so that some of them may grow the next year, but some of them may not grow for 2 years or 3 years down the road to help ensure that that plant lives on. Another physical dormancy that some seeds exhibit is self-sterility. If you go to a plant sale and you buy one plant, which I've done many times because I am cheap, I find out later I can't really collect seed from one plant because it requires either a second plant or more than 2 plants with a different genetic background to set seed. So if you go to plant sales and you buy rosinweed or asters, black-eyed Susans, or coreopsis, make certain that you buy more than one plant so that you can overcome this particular physical dormancy. Now, this term is physiologic dormancy, and just to explain it in our human terms, there's not too many of us that can live in temperatures outside of about 32 to 100 degrees for very long without having some assistance. And the plants require certain temperatures also sometimes to live. Many of them require a winter time, and that's why a lot of times they say, put your seed down in the fall, let it go through the winter, and then it will come up in the spring. Well, my history is if I do that in the ground, I've long forgotten where I put seed in the ground in the fall, or something else has grown up there, or I pull it because I've forgotten there was something there and thinking it was a weed. So that's why I find that growing these seeds in little pots for me is the best thing. A lot of times you will see this word stratification, or cold, moist stratification. And that's where we take the seeds, we either put them in a damp paper towel, damp sand, damp vermiculite, put them in a Ziploc bag, label them, and put them in the refrigerator a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or longer if you're like me and you forget it's in there and then find it later on. And then you plant them and you fool them into thinking they have been through a nice long winter and they come up. We had an interesting example. I put the ashy sunflower on here. We had some seeds collected for us. We tried to grow them in a greenhouse and they just didn't come up. But when we planted them in little cups and had them outside through the winter, we found that they did come up. In reading, I found that this ashy sunflower actually requires some fluctuating temperatures. It needs some warm days and some colder nights. So you just never know the mind of the seeds. And some plants require light to germinate. Many of them, you put a bean seed in the soil, you push it down with your finger and cover it up. Many seeds, that's perfectly fine, but most of our native plant seeds, we just lay on top of the soil, pat them down, wet them, and keep them moist until they germinate. Milkweed seeds are one of the seeds that require light to germinate. I took some pictures. If you're going out to collect your own seeds, this is kind of what you might want to look for. On the top two photos, on the left is the coreopsis in flower. Then the middle stem is after the petals have fallen, and you just see the little dead parts sticking out the top, but the ovary and the stem is still green. What you want to do is wait until that ovary and the stem turns brown, as in the top part of the photo. And then with the coreopsis, you can just take it and kind of shred it with your fingers. And even if those are not all seeds in there, some of that is just a little bit of junk from the seed. I plant that too because it doesn't bother me. As long as I'm planting the seeds, it's fine. The bottom photo is a wine cup seed head. And if you can see or imagine in the left part of that photo, all those little seeds are stacked together like a donut around the edges of the seed head. So when it is dry, again, the stem and the seed part, you can just take those seeds out with your fingernail or thumbnail and separate them. And then you remember that wine cups are one of those that has the physical dormancy. I usually use the sandpaper and the sand block method to kind of abrade the edges of those before I try to plant them. And they tend to germinate better that way. I've had a terrible time with wine cup seeds, but I'm getting better. To store your seeds, because you probably don't want to plant them all at one time, I like to use these little gift bags that you can get on Amazon, 100 per pack at a fairly reasonable price. I put the seeds in there. The one on the top left is probably, you will notice, looks familiar if you do any kind of seed picking. This is milkweed, and I have yet to take the fluff off of it. I just had collected those not too long ago and haven't really processed them. In the bottom left-hand side, you can also store in just regular mailing envelopes or those little key envelopes, but just make sure whatever you do, you don't depend on your memory to say, oh, I'll remember what I put in this bag, because I promise you, you will not. So you write the name of it on there, you put when you collected it and what it is. And then if you want to do long-term storage, I just stack those things in a little container over on the right and stick them in the back of my fridge. This is not really the cold, moist treatment. This is just dry seed storage in the refrigerator. And then I really, on the cheap, when I start seeds at home, I like to upcycle my pots. So when I have a salad out, or I got a birthday bundt cake in this little top left container, when I first saw it, I thought, hey, that would make a great seed starting greenhouse. So I saved those things, not all of them, but some of them. Then in the bottom, there are a few more examples, little muffin trays, those little square snack trays that you get the cheese and crackers and whatever in at the grocery store. And then I found these little mini cake pans at the dollar store, 5 for $1. I can line all of those up in a 10 by 20 tray. And I did invest in some of those 7-inch raised tops, ventilated tops to go on. Doesn't show up well in the photo, but you kind of get the idea that it makes a little greenhouse. I do not use that at all when it's hot in the summer, but in the fall and winter, I put one of those on there. It keeps the moisture in the pans, and it also helps keep the blue jays from pecking around in my seed trays. If you are new to growing seeds, I'm just going to give you a little bit of idea on the choices that you can make. I like to make my own starting medium, but if you just want to go buy a bag, I would look for a potting mix that says seed starting. There are many potting mixes at the store, but a lot of the potting soils, the things I don't like about them, many of them have bigger chunks in them of stuff, which is fine if you're transferring plants into a pot. But little seeds need a very light, fine mix. A lot of times I will use vermiculite. I've used it just by itself sometimes. You don't want to get it too wet because it can stay soggy. Or I can blend it with perlite. You notice the perlite kind of looks like popcorn, and it doesn't hold very much water. The vermiculite does hold a lot of water. And I do put a little amendment in. I use Dr. Earth's kelp meal. It has mycorrhizae fungi, and it has some bacteria in it. And then once I've put the seeds in and patted them down, I use a little chick grit on top, which provides a little micronutrients. It also helps hold the lightweight seeds down, and it keeps a little moisture at the surface. And water. You may not be particularly picky about your water, but I feel like that I want to give my seeds the best start in our tap water. At least I'm in Pearland, and we have chloramines, which is a combination of chlorine and ammonia in our tap water that to kill microorganisms. But if we're adding bacteria and fungi to our growing mix, why do we want to add tap water in there to kill all of that? So I try to treat my tap water a little bit. You notice this is ascorbic acid, which is just vitamin C, and 1/4 teaspoon will neutralize 40 gallons of tap water. So really, if I'm just making a gallon, I just use a few little grains, put it in a gallon of water, and then I have that water available for me. Now, this is a little 30-second video on actually how to put holes in these pans and put the potting soil in it. Let's say we have done that. We've kept them covered, we've kept them moist. And then after a certain amount of time, you have success, or sometimes not. You notice on the far right, there's just 2 or 3 plants in that pot that came up, but the other pot has many, many plants. These are just my references: Native Plant Propagation by Jan Midgley. And then I use this website, Prairie Moon Nursery, just for their germination codes a lot of times, where I have the rectangle around it, the C30, that means cold treatment for 30 days. Now we're in the South and it's not always the same for us, but at least it gives me an idea of what the cold treatment should be. And the last one is just a reference from Nature's Way resources on the vitamin C and the chloramines. Thank you.